Welcome to Carolina Breast Friends. Thank you for joining us today. We are excited to have David Bonilla with Two Trees Acupuncture in Charlotte. And today he is sharing with us the benefits of acupuncture and complementary therapies for cancer support. Hey, David, good to see you.
Hi, good to see you.
Thanks for being with us today. Tell us about your practice to start.
Yes, so as you said, we're located in Charlotte. We've been here for 7 years. I've been practicing acupuncture for about 10. And we treat all kinds of patients that come through our clinic, but relevant to this talk today, we do treat a lot of cancer patients that come through. And those are people that are recently diagnosed, that are well on the cancer journey, and people that have completed it and they're, in their post 5-year or beyond. And so when we talk about treating cancer with acupuncture, it's kind of misleading because the truth of the matter is we don't treat cancer. We treat the person who has cancer. And so that is where the idea of complementary therapy comes up, because it would be really irresponsible to try to treat cancer with just acupuncture or just herbs or something like that, because it's frankly, it's not enough. I like to combine both approaches, and I've seen really great results with people when they do that. And I've seen bad results when people do not. So, we do have people that are eschewing what I'll call biomedical interventions like chemotherapy, radiation, and surgery. And I understand why they don't want to do those things, and I'm here to support them in any capacity. But I see people get better faster when they incorporate both. So yeah, as far as how acupuncture can support people with cancer, the main thing that I see is people coming in to manage the side effects of cancer treatment. Whether that's from chemotherapy, radiation, or surgery, there's always some sort of complication that comes up with that. The most common thing I see is neuropathy. I'd say I get more patients coming to see me that are experiencing that than any other condition related to cancer therapy. A close second would be things like brain fog or chemo brain or things like that. And there's some other things like general pains as well. But, rather than diving too deep into any kind of specific manifestation, I'll kind of zoom out and give a broader picture of Chinese medicine in general, because acupuncture is a part of Chinese medicine. And it's the distinction between Chinese medicine and modern biomedicine is one of philosophy. So when you're undergoing biomedical treatment, the treatment is guided by objective tests. So they want to see, where is the cancer? How big is it? Is it growing? What kind of blood markers do you have? How are your inflammatory markers? That sort of thing. And then they're going to treat you based on those sort of objective tests. And basically, when you get a cancer diagnosis, you have it until you don't. And Chinese medicine doesn't really work like that. Everything that we do is subjective. So we're looking for your experience. What are you experiencing? Because you can take two people with the exact same cancer diagnosis and they have completely different experiences. So it doesn't really do me a whole lot of good to sit here and think of someone as having breast cancer. It's more like they have breast cancer and the whole experience of their life. And so when I talk about the zoomed out view that Chinese medicine would take, think about it like this: like, we exist in this world within the cycles of the world. So there's the day-night cycle, there is the seasons, there's the different, you call epochs of your life, right? Your early childhood, adolescence, early adulthood, middle age, elder years, that sort of thing. So depending on where you fall and how harmonized you are with all of those different cycles, that is going to guide our treatment. So the biggest thing, my favorite teacher at my school is a doctor from China, and he said, if you can fix sleep and stress, everything gets better. So the first cycle I look at is, how harmonized are you with the day-night cycle? And I have yet to meet a cancer patient that is having a great night's sleep. So that's kind of the first thing that we work on is getting sleep harmonized, because I think we all understand the importance of sleep. I don't really need to explain that. And there's some simple things that I tell all my patients that are struggling with sleep to do. One thing that works really, really well is hot water foot soaks. And I'm a huge proponent of this. I do it myself. You can't do it if you have active neuropathy in your feet, because you can't feel how hot the water is. But if you don't, it's a great option. So what you do is you stick your feet in super hot water for about 10 to 20 minutes. And that water's got to be what I call hot tub hot. So it should tingle. And that tingling means the capillaries in the feet are dilating. And what's going to happen basically is, if you think of your circulatory system like a big complex garden hose, if there's a kink at any point in the garden hose, the circulation of the entire system is impacted. You see this with things like high blood pressure, where you have less efficient peripheral circulation, where then if you dilate the peripheral circulation, those peripheral blood vessels, for example, if you take someone into a sauna, their blood pressure decreases because there's more room in the blood vessels for the blood pressure to, decrease. So what happens when you soak your feet in super hot water? Obviously, all those, biological occurrences are happening, but from the Chinese medicine perspective, when you're not sleeping, perhaps everyone is familiar with the concept of yin and yang. In Chinese medicine, yin and yang is a very concrete thing. It's not so abstract. Yin is kind of like the restive aspect of your body, and yang is the activity aspect. And from there, it kind of branches out to encompass every function of the body. So when your sleep is really, really poor, it's like the yang qi, we'll say, is too active, and it's not being anchored by the yin. So during the day, your yang qi should be very active, and at night, the yin qi should be more active. And what the hot water foot soak does is it descends the yang qi. And you can feel that in yourself immediately once you start to do it. Within a few minutes, sensations of stress and tension in the body start to melt away. I always tell people not to be reading or on their phone or anything like that when they're doing it, because you have to let the mind sort of burn through the experiences of the day. And that will allow things to kind of settle. It's like when some people have used this metaphor of, if you want muddy water to become clear, just leave it alone. And so that's what the hot water foot soak is helping to do. It's just helping settle the body, but also that felt sense of things going on at the feet. That's very, very important to help bring things down, bring down the awareness. You might notice that if your feet are cold, it's very, very hard to sleep. And this is actually verified by experimentation. There was an article about a research study that was published in Nature, which is one of the top 3, science journals in the world. And they were looking at factors that would help people fall asleep quickly. And they found that the more dilated the blood vessels were in the hands and feet, the faster that person fell asleep. So, I've been telling people to do foot soaks for years, and then I see that study and I get really excited by things like that, because it's like it's a verification that our intuition is correct about these sorts of things. So, going back to cycles, that's the most important thing, is harmony with the day-night cycle, because that's the smallest unit of life that you have control over, is the 24-hour period. And so once you have a good handle on sleep, then we can talk about things like diet. And now I know, talking to people who are dealing with cancer, whatever stage you're dealing with, diet is kind of it's a very individual thing. Some people go completely vegan, some people don't, some people do a lot of fasting, others can't or won't. So I really try to approach people from what they're comfortable with, because any change we make has to preserve quality of life. So, I've seen really, really impressive results from people that do fasting protocols before chemotherapy infusions and things like that. For people that are taking daily chemotherapeutics, that's not really an option. So that's where the individualization of Chinese medicine really comes into play, and trying to look at what you're actually experiencing, because you still need to enjoy your life, and food is part of the enjoyment of life. If you're not enjoying what you're eating, then it's probably not for you. You shouldn't have to slog through a dietary change, maybe temporarily for a little while or something, to do an elimination diet or something. But at the end of the day, food is part of the joy of life, and you really should be trying to enjoy it as much as you can. So easier said than done, I understand. But that's kind of the main thing, is that, it's within reason. To me, it's less important what people are eating. It's more important when they're eating. So, I'm a really big proponent of things like intermittent fasting, as long as it's comfortable enough for the patient to do so. So I recommend that people, if they can, to skip breakfast and only eat lunch and dinner, and keep that window that they eat within to be a little narrow, like 8 to 10 hours, something like that. And then the rest of the time you should be in a fasted state. That allows the body to do repair work, There's other knock-on effects too that are a little more theoretical in nature, like when you're sleeping, the enzyme that's responsible for breaking down insulin is the same enzyme that is responsible for breaking down amyloid beta plaques, which cause Alzheimer's disease. So if you go to bed with a full stomach, your brain is unable to use that enzyme to break down those plaques in the brain. Instead, it's using it to get rid of insulin in the body and break insulin down. So it's very, very important that if you eat food at night, to have a couple hours before you go to bed. Another thing to keep in mind is, I talked about eating within reason, whatever you want. And that means that we can't break the laws of nature, which is, if you have too much of the sweet flavor, that's going to cause problems. So in Chinese medicine, every flavor is associated with a different dynamic in the body. The sweet flavor is associated with growth. And usually it's healthy growth, like the growth of tissue and things like that. Your body's always regenerating. But there's pathological sweetness. And, these are very, very basic concepts, but it's important to kind of lay this groundwork to give a perspective of how Chinese medicine operates. So that's why I'm kind of going over this stuff. But the sweet flavor, think of it like a polarity. You have the positive polarity, which is, sweet fruits and vegetables. And those are typically fine. I don't really care if people eat bananas or papayas or things like that, as long as it's not too excess, you're not having digestive upset with that sort of thing. The negative polarity of the sweet flavor would be like sugar, ice cream, candy, that sort of stuff. So when people tell me that they're really struggling with this sort of thing, I try to remind people that the sweet flavor is not the enemy here. It's just the type of sweet flavor. So if you find that you're really having a hard time with a sweet craving, just after dinner time, one thing you can do is just put like a sweet potato in the oven and have it ready to go and eat that with your dinner, so that craving for sweet is dulled a little bit and met in a healthy way. Another thing too is if you're struggling with timing of eating, is to know that the hormones in the body that control your appetite, that signal to tell you when you're hungry, you can train those within 3 days. So if skipping breakfast seems like a big ask, just wait 3 days. Your stomach will kind of be mad at you, and then it'll get used to it. For most of human history, we did not eat 3 square meals a day. That's actually early 19th century factory worker type things, where it's not necessarily natural to do that. And we can see how, especially in modern Western society, how out of control our relationship is with food. So again, not what you eat, it's more important when you're eating. And that's another way to harmonize what's going on within that day-night cycle. Another thing is appropriate activity. And, everyone has their own preferences for when they can exercise and what kind of exercise they can do. At a bare minimum, you should be walking every day. If you can't walk, stationary bike, water aerobics, things like that, just something to do every single day to move that stagnant chi. When you wake up in the morning, it's really important to kind of do your movements, even if you don't break a sweat or exercise per se, to just move around and stretch and do things like that. And that's going to help your mental state throughout the day. We say in the morning, the liver chi is very active. The liver is associated with the season of spring. And, when I say organs in Chinese medicine, I'm not talking about your liver per se. It's more like it's an umbrella term, like a metaphor that we use to describe reality. So liver is in charge of a whole lot of different things in the body that doesn't correspond to biomedical terms. So just want to clarify that. But so the liver is associated with the springtime, and the springtime is kind of like the waking up of nature in the yearly cycle. So honing that into the 24-hour cycle, the springtime of the day is in the morning time. So just like nature kind of stretches up to meet the sun, the coming sun of summer, you see that with like woody plants growing and things like that, new leaves sprouting. Your body needs to do the same thing. It needs to wake up with the sun and move around. So really, really important, go outside, get natural light in your eyes without sunglasses on or through a window. That has a lot of implications for timing of the circadian rhythm, which, that's basically that is the most, the closest parallel that biomedical knowledge has to the importance of cycles in Chinese medicine is circadian rhythm. It's basically the timing of hormones and such in the body. The melatonin and cortisol cycles being the bulk of circadian rhythm. So when you go to bed at night and the lights go down, melatonin is secreted that helps you stay asleep. When you wake up in the morning, cortisol should be secreted. Now, if you're not exposed to natural light at sunrise and sunset, or with an hour or two of those, when the light is changing in the sky, it's kind of like blue, pink kind of appearance. Your eyes have these receptors in them that there's a special class of receptors. They only see light that comes in at an angle in the morning and in dusk, at sunrise and sunset. So if you don't get that light, those nerves those cells in the eye, the melanopsin cells, they don't get stimulated. And so it's harder for your body to kind of figure out what time it is. And that's when your day-night cycle gets all out of whack. It's hard to go to sleep at night and things like that, hard to wake up in the morning. So super common advice I give my patients is go outside. It takes 10 minutes. On a cloudy day, it's a little bit longer, but still just go outside and get that natural light in around sunrise and sunset. And you'll find that it helps wake you up. And then at night, when you get that natural dusk light, your retinas actually adjust their sensitivity to light, so that if you go back inside your house and you have artificial lights on, or if you look at a screen, you're sort of buffered to the effects of that blue light that's coming through, which maybe some of us have learned that blue light is the light that keeps us awake. It's not the enemy. At night, it's more about bright light. So you want to dim lights in your house. Don't have overhead lights on if you can. That's going to help you go to sleep. But after about 3-4 days, your body's day-night cycle starts to adjust to that. And now throughout the year, that's going to change with daylight savings time and as there's more hours of daylight in the sky and things like that. So that brings us to kind of seasonal appropriateness. So right now, spring is basically upon us. And you can tell because it'll be warm for a few days and then 25 degrees for another couple days. And that's classic Charlotte weather, I guess. I'm from Florida, so it's either hot or not. It doesn't really get cold. It's just hot for 6 months out of the year and then not. Regardless, though, it's nice to have seasons in North Carolina to kind of let you know how you should be acting, right? And so springtime, it's very, very important that you keep a glove and hat and jacket around you, because that weather will kind of play tricks on you. You don't want to be caught out when it gets cold again, and you don't want to feel cold, basically. That's really going to harm the emergence of the yang qi in your body getting ready for springtime. So it's important in spring to wake up a little bit earlier and go to sleep at a reasonable time. And in the summertime, you wake up a little bit earlier and you stay up a little bit later. And in the wintertime, you can sleep in and then go to bed early, that sort of thing. So that's how humans have traditionally adjusted to the change in seasons. It's just by following your cues. So if you notice that you're more tired in winter and it's harder to get out of bed, that's normal, that's healthy. So obviously our kind of 9-to-5 society doesn't really work with that. We don't account for that. But your body does. Your cells don't care what era you live in. They're behaving the same as someone who was around 2,500 years ago when all these ancient Chinese texts were written, describing how to, live a healthy life. So yeah, we've gotten the day-night cycle, the seasonal cycle, and then I want to talk a little bit about age-appropriate activity, right? So when you're young, you can kind of, as we know, you get away with anything. You get injured, you heal really quickly. And when you hit 30, that stops, and you take a weird step off a stair and you sprain your ankle and it hurts for 2 years, and you have to spend thousands of dollars going to massage therapists trying to get it fixed. That's just a fact of life, and we just have to be a little more careful how we do our activities. And the big thing is being very, very sensitive to how you're feeling day to day. So even professional athletes, we see them as like finely tuned machines. We see them performing at a very high level when they're doing their thing. But we don't see is the behind the scenes. We don't see how if Michael Phelps steps into the pool and does a lap and doesn't feel it, he's getting out, and that's true. That's actually how he is. So some days you're going to feel great. You're going to want to exercise, and other days you're not. So I don't really like couch to 5K type programs. I don't like things that are arbitrarily determining your activity. I don't like 30-day challenges and things like that. I mean, there's a place for it. I think there's something to be said for being held accountable. But the most important thing is that you go with how you're feeling. So if you're not a morning exercise person, don't force it, because that's your brain and your body telling you that you're going to get injured if you do something like that. So keep in mind why you're exercising. It's to be healthy. It's not to perform in the Olympics. And we kind of take all our cues from a performance-based mentality rather than a health-based mentality. It doesn't take that much to be healthy. Long walks every day, minimal weight training, which could just be like exercises with bands, which are very safe. It doesn't take much, and that'll keep you healthy for the rest of your life. So any exercise you do, I really like to tell people that it should be something you can see yourself doing into your 90s, So just be mindful of the exercise you're choosing. Things like yoga and Tai Chi, Qigong, those are great because elderly people do them. And so it's safe for you to do at any age. Now you do have to listen to your body. Every teacher of that practice is different. If something's not agreeing with you, you have to listen to that. But as time marches on, as we start to age a little bit, we get invitations to slow down. And so it's very, very important that we take that time. One of my patients is in her late 70s and she works for AIG, and she travels, this is pre-COVID, she was traveling across the country every few weeks. And we would talk about aging and what it is to work in that advanced age. And, she said she does it because she loves it, but it is very tiring. And I said, what's the biggest thing that you've noticed as you've aged? Like, what's different? And we were outside, it was a sunny day. And she said that as she's gotten older, one of the things she's noticed is that when the sun hits her face, for example, she really, really notices it. It's something that feels really good to her. And this is that really illustrates that invitation to kind of slow down. The ancient Taoists, which is a school of philosophy from China that really influenced Chinese medicine in a big way. It's probably half of Chinese medicine comes from Taoism. They said that, you can do all your meditation and your Qigong and become a fully realized being, a sage, they'd say. So this is like someone who goes through life in like basically a perfect way. And you would be left enjoying the changing of the seasons. That's the highest aspiration that they have for what it is to have a good life, is to just notice the change of the seasons. And the seasons are changing all the time. So, just, it's kind of a interesting discussion to have in a talk about cancer, because one of the universal things I see with all my patients, and it's a great lesson for me too, is the appreciation of life that they have, especially after they survive cancer, is that every day is a gift, and we can kind of take things for granted. Things like the changing weather, or a rainstorm, or a sunny day, or flowers blooming and things like that. And the more you can kind of soak all that in and dispel in your mind the notion of bad weather, it doesn't exist, the happier you're going to be in life, the more in harmony you're going to be with the outside world. If you can watch clouds move, you're syncing up with the natural rhythms of nature. And so your mind is going to be at peace, because that's the speed of life itself, So I hope that's not too abstract for people. And I know I haven't really talked a lot about acupuncture, but I do like to kind of give a broader scope of what I offer as far as Chinese medicine and the philosophy associated with it, because it's really about a way of living rather than individual acupuncture points, which are interesting, and we're going to get to that next. So let's say you came into my office and you told me you're dealing with cancer or the sequelae of cancer therapy, things like that. We would, the intake you fill out, the form you fill out, is quite extensive. It's 5 pages, and I basically learn everything about you and where you're from and what do you like to do in your spare time and what do you think's impacting your health in a negative way, and then a massive checklist of 70 different things that could go wrong in your body that makes everyone feel terrible, because I never ask what's going well, until I actually see you. So from there, we kind of go over the paperwork a little bit, and we kind of figure out, what is your individual experience? What do you want out of these sessions, out of acupuncture? Why are you coming in? That sort of thing. So from there, it kind of depends what people are experiencing. So like I said, cancer or not, I'm going to treat you exactly the same way. So if you tell me that your stomach hurts all the time, it doesn't really matter to me if it's caused by medication, or if you don't know what's causing it, or if it's food related. The experience you have is what I'm treating. So the points may differ, right? Acupuncture points are located all over the body. There's 365 traditional points and then dozens of extra points. And I've learned all of them and forgotten most of them. And so I have to crack open the books every now and then and go back to square one. But, we have a huge bucket of options to choose from when I'm treating people. But a lot of times, what's interesting with cancer is that the patterns that people come in with are kind of the same. And so I'll explain a little bit about what patterns are and how they differ from regular diagnoses. So I mentioned earlier how when you get a diagnosis in biomedicine, you have it until you don't. It's A or B, yes or no, on or off. Chinese medicine doesn't work like that at all. We do pattern recognition, pattern diagnosis. And so patterns are kind of like symptoms that go together, and they form kind of like a constellation where, you can look into the sky and you can see, the Big Dipper, right? And the Big Dipper is, in astronomical terms, it's an asterism. An asterism is an easily recognizable grouping of stars that is part of a broader constellation. The Big Dipper being part of Ursa Major, the Big Bear. So yeah, people come to me and they say, I'm having neuropathy in my hands and feet. I'm nauseous all the time. I have a headache. I'm not sleeping very well. I'm really irritable. My moods swing everywhere. I don't know what's going on. And so what I'm hearing is, after going through the paperwork and kind of sifting through everything, really like I only need a few bits of information to kind of see that constellation. And then there's acupuncture point combinations that I then use. And then you can pretty much immediately people feel better. And the treatment is, in a way, the diagnosis, because if you don't feel better, it means that I had the wrong diagnosis. I recognized the wrong pattern. So we do a different combination of points, and then hopefully you feel better. But that is all to say, when a pattern is something that you probably have your entire life. And for example, we can talk about side effects of medication. And so you can give 100 people the same medication, and many of them have varying side effects. Some of them have no side effects. And so why is that, right? It's not random. It's that we all have kind of a baseline pattern that we're born with, where our health is impacted in a unique way according to those patterns. And so it's like the medication is reacting with the body, and it's showing us our inherent weaknesses and where we're unhealthy, right? So if someone takes a medication and they're getting headaches, well, it's not the medication that's giving them headaches. It's the medication interacting with their particular systemic organization that's causing the headaches, because the person next to them isn't getting a headache. So it's not the meds. And so that's why we have a shot at making you feel better with acupuncture, because we're taking this other view that I don't care that the medication's causing the headaches. I care, where is the headache occurring? Because the headache that occurs here is distinct from the one that's at the back of the head, which is different from the one at the top of the head, which is different from the all over headache. And those all come from different organ systems in Chinese medicine. And so it's all, it's a whole thing, as my Jewish mom would say. So it's a whole thing. And we have to kind of figure out where it's all coming from. And the medication is almost making it easy for me, because when people talk about side effects, I know exactly what pattern they're dealing with. And when we figure out your pattern, for example, liver yang rising, which means the qi of the liver, instead of going out to the forelimbs, is going all the way up. You get headaches, you get red eyes, you get angry. There's the shouting, that's associated with anger, which is the sound of the liver. So you hear someone who has like a real shouting voice, even if they're not angry, that's a liver type. So someone walks in my office and they're like me and they're really loud and they're kind of boisterous. That's a liver personality. And so there's points we can do to kind of make them feel better and settle in their own skin a little bit. That's a kind of the approach of pattern recognition. Is my job is to recognize the pattern that you're walking around with. And a lot of these patterns you're born with, they're inherited from your parents and your grandparents. And it's not anything that is a pathology per se. It's not like having a pattern is bad. We all have them. It's part of being a human. What's bad is not knowing how to handle it. And that's, there's a really, people hear this refrain quite a bit where you hear the body is always trying to find balance. And we're always trying to, just intuitively, we're going to find the thing that makes us healthy. Have you guys noticed that doesn't actually work? That as life goes on, we continuously do the wrong thing. We eat the food we shouldn't eat. We stay up too late. We do the activity we shouldn't. All that sort of stuff. We're constantly messing ourselves up. And there was a guy, his name's Chip Chase. He unfortunately passed away. but he was a translator of ancient Chinese texts. And his big insight was that no, like we're not always intuitively trying to go towards health, quite the opposite. We're always veering away from that. And it takes someone with a holistic view to say, oh, you need to tweak this in your life, and then you can kind of get back on course, right? And, the advice I'd give to someone that is taking the same chemotherapy drug as the person next to them and having the same experience as them, but maybe their presentation's a little bit different in terms of their body structure, their age, their energy levels, that sort of thing. It's like you're going down the road, you're veering into the ditch. Which side of the road are you going? If you're going right, I'm going to tell you to go left. But then you're going to look at me and say, well, you told me to go to the right. And I'll say, well, yeah, but you're going towards the left side of the ditch. So that's not the right approach. So to me, that's the true value of Chinese medicine. Again, is this individualized approach. It's all going to go back to what is your experience. And there's a lot we can work with as far as that is concerned. Now, acupuncture is one approach. That's a big thing. That's, the bulk of my practice is doing acupuncture to people. Another is the kind of dietary lifestyle advice, like foot soaks and diet changes, that sort of things. There's mindset, I think, injecting a little bit of Chinese philosophy into people's experience and having them be aware of how thoughts work and how emotions work. That can be very helpful. But there's other things we do too. I'm a body worker. Prior to doing acupuncture, I was a massage therapist. And then when I was in school for acupuncture, I learned a style of body work from China called Tui Na. And it's a very, very interesting style. It's hard to explain, but I'll say that in China, there are no chiropractors. They have Tui Na doctors, and it's kind of like an all-encompassing thing. It's like they do joint, we call them adjustments, but in Tui Na, they're called sets. So we do joint setting. Tui Na means pushing and grasping. So it's a different kind of body work, and we can just kind of make people feel better immediately when they're having like headaches going up the neck and stuff. We can take care of that instantly with Tui Na for the most part. So that's another thing that I offer, and that's very individualized kind of body work. And there's other things too. One thing I really was excited to talk about today, and I don't know if really all my patients that I've talked to about this have never heard of it, and it's honestly new to me within the last several months, is something called hydrogen inhalation therapy. I'm assuming you guys haven't heard of it. If you guys are already familiar, let me know. So I'll give you a quick background. Hydrogen was thought to be inert in the body as a gas. So every time we eat fiber, the fermentation of fiber in the large intestine releases hydrogen gas. So we thought it didn't do anything, that there's no effect. But in 2007, a Japanese researcher discovered that he could induce inflammation in a cell culture, bathe it in hydrogen gas, and then that cell culture would display no evidence of inflammation. And so they started scaling this research to animal models, and they would induce inflammation in animals. You can do it in all sorts of horrible ways, and I feel so bad for these animals. But then they would administer hydrogen gas to them, or hydrogen-rich water, or injectable saline, or things like that, and they would get rid of the inflammation, essentially, without going into too much detail. So then they scaled it up to human trials. And it's to the point now where hydrogen is in hospitals in East Asia. It's not ubiquitous, but it's in many hospitals. There's at least 10 hospitals in Japan that administer hydrogen to patients. A few hospitals give it to every patient, no matter what. It's used in critical care scenarios like strokes, heart attacks, because inflammation is actually, aside from the initial injury of the heart attack or the stroke, the inflammatory cascade that happens when you suffer a heart attack or stroke is mediated by hydrogen gas. So you can actually prevent a lot of the brain damage and speed up recovery through the inhalation of hydrogen gas. Now, when I first heard about this, I thought this is BS. I've seen a lot in my career as an acupuncturist. I've seen a lot of medical gadgets that people are really curious about. I don't have a lot of faith in a lot of that stuff. So I went on Dr. Google and tried to disprove this, and just the more, I'll leave it to you guys to look into it. The more you look it up, the more you'll see there's a lot of research behind this. This is something that I think is going to be the future of medicine in 10 to 20 years, much like oxygen therapy is so revolutionary for people's survival. And we think of what would medical care look like without oxygen. I think that's how we're going to see hydrogen. So hydrogen gas, what it does, molecular hydrogen, is the formula is H2. That's the chemical name of it, is H2. It interacts with a specific type of free radical, which is an inflammatory particle, called the hydroxyl radical, which is OH. So what H2 does is it donates a part of itself, one of the H's, to this unstable free radical, and it turns it into H2O. So you're taking the most toxic free radical in the body, which is what is, this is generated when you breathe in air pollution, for example. The hydroxyl radical permeates in the lung tissue and destroys cells because that unstable oxygen molecule is stealing electrons from cell membranes to stabilize itself. Well, that causes a chain reaction. For example, in China, every single COVID patient in the hospital is getting hydrogen in addition to oxygen because hydrogen is stopping the inflammatory cascade that COVID causes. So it's really, really interesting. So we've been offering this in our clinic to our patients now for several months. And I've seen things with hydrogen gas that I have not seen with acupuncture or anything else I've done. I've treated, for example, neuropathy. I've treated neuropathy with acupuncture quite a bit. Very rarely do I get an instantaneous result. Usually people feel something after the session, like something's different, but it usually takes several sessions before we start to see really big changes in the quality of life. The several patients that I've used hydrogen therapy with have noticed immediate change. One gentleman I treated last week, I treated him 2 weeks ago with hydrogen therapy. He came in last week to see me. He's had neuropathy in his feet for 35 years. In one session, it's down to 10% of what it was. He's ecstatic. I'm ecstatic. I'm still blown away. I've treated maybe 30, 35 patients that have these various, horrible, debilitating conditions like RA, brain tumors, things like that. And I'm seeing really amazing things. One woman has a quote unquote benign brain tumor. It's not cancerous, but it's growing on a blood vessel in her brain. And when she came to see me, you could actually see it. It's under the skin, but it's almost like protruding. It was like the size of a chickpea. And you could, she had me touch it. It's like this, it's a tumor. If you've ever felt a tumor, you know what it feels like. And so they would have to do surgery on it, which is, it's an open brain surgery. And she's already had it removed once. And I sent her, I can't make claims, right? I can't tell someone hydrogen's going to cure XYZ. That's not how medicine works. So I don't do that. So I provided her information. She took a look at it for herself. She actually went and purchased her own machine. She's been using it for 4 to 6 hours a day for the past month. And she came in a couple weeks ago, and her tumor, you can't even see it. When I felt it, it was the size of like a split pea under her skin, under her scalp. Her stabbing 24/7 headache that she's had is completely gone. One of the side effects of hydrogen therapy, which is really interesting, is it improves your skin. Because as we might know, inflammation is the driver of the destruction of collagen, which holds your skin, makes it firm. Another thing that hydrogen is used for, particularly in Japan and Singapore, in like a retail setting, it's used as a youth and beauty treatment. So you'll walk into like a hydrogen bar, and they'll offer you 10 minutes of a free hydrogen therapy, and they'll use what's called a dermatoscope, where they can look at the capillaries just before the cuticle, where the skin meets the fingernail, where it's very thin there. And you can see those capillaries under this dermatoscope image, and they look like little tubes, and the tops of the tubes are all pinched. And you'll see like a little red blood cell kind of trying to come up, and it goes up and it goes back down. It can't quite get through. After about 10 minutes of hydrogen therapy, they put you back under that dermatoscope, and all the capillaries are open. Those tubes are no longer pinched shut, and you just see high traffic flow of red blood cells. It's no longer 1 or 2 red blood cells. It's thousands of red blood cells flowing through. So what's happening is all these tiny little capillaries are being kind of inflated. They're being dilated, and blood is rushing into tissues that are, and this is why it's working with stroke patients, for example. It's not only decreasing the inflammation, but when you have a stroke, when you have an injury of any sort in the brain or the heart or anywhere, you get areas that are hypoxic. These are little pockets of tissue that are not getting great blood flow. And so anything you can do to increase the microvasculature, you dilate microvasculature blood flow, you're going to see a healing of these hypoxic areas. So her skin looks incredible. I'm not just trying to say that. Like, she tells me she looks in the mirror every day and she can't believe what she looks like, hydrogen, there is a lot of research with cancer particularly out of China. There's a study that was done where they took two groups of people that had stage 4 cancer, various cancers, and one group had normal treatment, so chemotherapy, surgery, radiation, all that sort of stuff. And then the other group had normal treatment plus hydrogen therapy every day. I want to say it was like 4 hours a day of hydrogen therapy. And what they found was the group that was the control group, just the normal treatment, their side effects of treatment increased gradually over I want to say it was 16 weeks. And then sadly, a lot of them passed away. And then the hydrogen group, their side effects of treatment actually went down to nothing. By the end of the treatment period, they had almost no side effects, and their survival rate was much, much higher. Many of them, much more of them survived the actual cancer therapy. And there's other case studies out there floating around. If you look on PubMed, which is a great resource for research, you can see case studies. For example, there was a woman in China who had a glioblastoma, a brain tumor, and she was terminal. The doctor said, "We are out of options for you. However, would you like to try hydrogen? You got to do it every day for like 4 to 6 hours." She said, "Absolutely." Within 6 months, her tumor had completely disappeared. She's still alive, doing great. So the reason hydrogen is thought to work with cancer so well is because remember that hydroxyl radical I told you about, that OH radical, that toxic free radical. Cancer spreads through the mechanism of inflammation. And so if you can take care of inflammation, if you can stop inflammation, you basically you starve a cancer cell. So a cancer cell requires inflammation to create new blood vessels, to spread, to do stemming, to multiply. And so when you take away inflammation, you're preventing the spread and growth of cancer, which is why in these case studies and these research studies, people's cancers are disappearing. I have another patient, she has cancer in her liver, in her breast, in her lung. She's on a maintenance chemo. And they said, we don't really have a shot at getting rid of the cancer, but we can keep it at bay, but you will be on this chemo for the rest of her life. So she's basically just been dealing with this cancer for a very long time. I told her about hydrogen therapy, some of this research I was talking about. She went home and bought her own machine. She's been using it for about 6 weeks. She had a tumor on her breast that she said that it was visible, that there was like a bump, and she could feel it every day. After about a month of doing hydrogen every day, about 4 hours a day, it's gone. And her lungs feel great. She can take a deep breath again. She just feels great. She has a DEXA scan in a couple of weeks, so we're going to know how her progress is. And that's really encouraging. One of the things that people say when they're using hydrogen is the energy boost that they get, because one of the things that it does is it actually increases cellular metabolism. So this has huge implications for people with diabetes, because diabetes is an inflammatory condition. People with diabetes, if you have type 2 diabetes, if you eat food, you have what's called postprandial inflammatory response. So after you eat, the body generates all this inflammation, which is like this vicious cycle, right? And you see this with a lot of autoimmune conditions where you get the vicious cycle of inflammation. So the inflammation causes the pain and the redness and the swelling, and in turn cells are less nourished and they're damaged, which causes more inflammation. So it's just this vicious cycle. So hydrogen interrupts that cycle of inflammation. It decreases swelling and pain. People with, I had a patient with long COVID. She had it since August. She came to me about a month ago. Short of breath, horrible brain fog, taking 3 naps a day. Just, you've heard these stories of people dealing with COVID for a really long time. After one session of using hydrogen for about an hour in my clinic, her shortness of breath was gone. She felt 90% better. After 3 sessions, she's basically all set. She feels better than she did before she had COVID. She says, I don't even need coffee in the morning. I just like the taste. Now, I wish that I had access to thousands of more people to use hydrogen with and to actually study it more in depth. There are a lot of NIH studies on hydrogen and how it works in the body. I just wanted to put that out there because that's super, super exciting. The company that we use is called Vital Reaction. There's a lot of different companies on the market that generate hydrogen machines, that produce hydrogen machines, but a lot of them are made in China out of old welding machines, and they put out like 99% pure hydrogen, which is actually dangerous. hydrogen, as we know, is very explosive. So it's important that the hydrogen that is pumped out of these machines is low concentration. So the vital reaction machines, the mini model that I use is 2 to 4% hydrogen, which is a very well researched threshold for hydrogen gas. It's very safe. Hydrogen is not flammable under 10% concentration. So I feel very comfortable using it in my clinic and advocating for people to use it at home. So this company, the machine is made in Japan, which is where most of the hydrogen research is coming from. And it's just got really good testing and things like that. So I trust them a lot. So yeah, that's kind of sums up about, yeah, go for it.
Well, I was just going to ask a quick question about the treatment method of hydrogen gas. Is it similar to wearing an oxygen
cannula
under your nose sort of thing, or?
Yeah, that's it. It's, you use a nasal cannula and it's hooked up to the machine. You can't smell or taste hydrogen. It's odorless. So there's no discomfort associated with it. And what's interesting compared to oxygen therapy is oxidative, right? Oxidative stress is the stress of unstable oxygen molecules in the body. That's what causes inflammation. So one of the side effects that people get from prolonged oxygen therapy is increased inflammation. So for example, in China, when they're giving hydrogen to COVID patients, they're giving it alongside oxygen, because hydrogen is not only stopping the inflammation that COVID produces, it's stopping the oxidative stress of oxygen itself. It's also dilating the alveoli in the lungs to increase the surface area so that you can actually get more more oxygen, which is a problem when you have, when you're hospitalized for COVID, there's a lot of fluid in the lungs and it's hard for the oxygen to actually reach the tissue. So anything you can do to kind of decrease the inflammation and dilate the blood vessels for healthy blood flow and things like that, that's going to be really helpful for really all disease processes that are characterized by inflammation. So witch cancer is definitely one of them. One of the things that hydrogen has been proven to act as is as an anti-apoptotic. So apoptosis is basically means programmed cell death. Every single cell has a kill switch. Under a certain condition, the cell will self-destruct and it releases like a bunch of inflammatory compounds when it does it. So when cancer is stressing a nearby cell, it's inducing apoptosis in healthy cells, and cancer cells do not have, it's almost like they've lost the ability to act appropriately under the stress of inflammation. Instead of self-destructing, they multiply. So hydrogen is starving the cancer of its ability to reproduce and grow, and it's also preventing the cell death of healthy cellular tissue. So there's so many functions to hydrogen therapy that are going on besides just decreasing inflammation, which things like ibuprofen can do. But what's really nice, and the big difference between hydrogen and all anti-inflammatory drugs, such as steroids or NSAIDs, is that it only acts on a couple toxic free radicals, the OH and ONOO free radicals for those curious, and it leaves alone the healthy cell processes that are responsible for cell respiration. So nitric oxide, for example, is a reactive oxygen species, an ROS, that is very, very similar in structure to these toxic free radicals, which are another type of oxygen species, but hydrogen leaves that alone. So you can basically pause all of the toxic inflammation in the body without interrupting the function of healthy cells. So my dad's a physician. When I first heard about this, I sent him some research articles, kind of out of skepticism, right? I wanted to get a more, because I get excited about things, right? I want someone to tell me why this is BS. And he said, we've been looking for this for 100 years. This is revolutionary. So I have a feeling that we're going to see a lot more presentations in hydrogen therapy with research coming out of China and Taiwan and Korea in the next 10 to 20 years. I mean, it can't come any sooner, honestly. I hope that we all learn more about it and spread the word. Do you have any more questions about that before I move on?
I don't think so. That is so fascinating, though. It's really interesting. And so can you do like one patient at a time in your clinic for the hydrogen therapy?
Yeah. So we have 2 machines in our clinic. So I can do 2 people at the same time in separate rooms, of course. But yeah, I've played with the idea of how can we get as many people as possible. It's a little expensive to get that many machines going, but For people that have really, really advanced cases, I don't think an hour once a week is enough. I think that really getting your own machine for home use is going to be the best bet for people. Like, for example, I have a patient who has RA. And, I don't do house calls, but I did for this woman because she's homebound. She can't really move. She's immobile. Her daughter-in-law comes to see me for acupuncture, and I told her about hydrogen. So I brought a machine over for her to use. And, one of the things with RA, if you've ever met someone with RA, is they have this really painful swelling in their limbs and their hands. So her hands were completely swollen to the point where it looked like she was wearing like a glove. You couldn't see, like, you can see like my tendons here. You couldn't see any dimension to the hands. It was like a flat surface of swelling. And her hands were spaded, which is something that happens with RA, where instead of being able to make an open palm, your fingers sort of do that, and you have very limited range of motion. So she's in a lot of pain. And I administered hydrogen for her for about 90 minutes, and we came back in and the swelling was gone. You could see the tendons. She said her hand pain was gone. So that lasted for about 4 days. She had relief for about 4 days. And so then she actually bought a machine for herself. Her daughter-in-law bought her a machine. And it's been, I want to say, 3 to 4 weeks. Her mobility has improved. She's sending me picture updates of the swelling, and the pressure sores on her legs are decreasing in color intensity. So she was having these really awful looking, like dark brown, dark red spots on her legs that are pressure sores. Maybe you guys have seen that before. And the dark red is gone. It's like a pink color. The brown is starting to decrease. She feels better and better. And it seems like the result is cumulative. The more she does it, the better she's getting. So again, like I mentioned, the brain tumor patient, the other cancer patient, this woman, the people that have these super advanced conditions, I really feel like home use is the most attainable. And honestly, it's, those machines are $1,800, but for someone that is homebound, it's a small price to pay for a shot at a healthy life. So while I don't recommend it to everyone, if you're just dealing with kind of a more minor condition, I don't think you need to buy your own machine. But if you have family members that are really suffering or something like that, that's kind of what I would say. And it's empowering too, because if you don't have to leave your house, one of the things that people with cancer may have noticed is that your life becomes a series of appointments. And that's one thing that I have noticed about acupuncture, is that when people come to me after a little while, they start to say that I'm the only appointment they actually look forward to, because they're not getting an infusion in a cold room or going to a doctor's office, which are kind of, I'm in my back office right now. My clinic is much prettier than this. So we try to keep it as far from like a medical looking environment as possible. So you won't see like gross bins around and stuff if you come to see me. But that there's like a kind of like a mental boost to that, where we try to create like a spa-like environment, because I think it's very important that people feel comfortable when they're getting medical treatment. Because yes, acupuncture is very relaxing and makes you feel good, boost your mood and decrease your pain. At the end of the day, it's a medical procedure. And, we are using needles. The needles don't really hurt. Most people don't feel them. If you do feel discomfort, it's momentary, it's transient. It's not like a hypodermic needle where it's a big hollow tube and they're injecting something into you and they have to put a Band-Aid on. It's not like that. So people's idea of needles is kind of conflated with acupuncture. And we get a lot of needle trauma from when we're kids. We get vaccines at the doctor and it's painful, and we don't like that. And that kind of carries forward in life. Now, I think if you're undergoing cancer therapy, most people have had a fair share of needle experiences. So my cancer patients do not care about needles at this point, especially a little acupuncture needle, which is no thicker than a hair follicle. But just I am here to talk about acupuncture. I figured I'd talk a little bit about it. So yeah, I do think there's a factoring into the quality of life aspect. I don't think every appointment should be something that you dread. There's got to be something where you actually feel good. My cancer patients that do massage therapy and other things like that, they really benefit. And unfortunately, when COVID happened, those early days, it was March, like 2 years ago, actually, I think I want to say it was like the 13th, it was yesterday, was 2 years to the day when kind of the whole country realized what was going on. We, businesses shut down, and my cancer patients really took a nosedive when they couldn't access things like acupuncture and massage therapy for those several weeks. Their condition really, really worsened. And so I really got to see how much we actually do contribute, because, I think everyone who questions acupuncture, including me as a practitioner, you do wonder how much of this is placebo, how much of it is just your mental, your mind making you feel better, which, I'll talk about placebo in a minute. But to see what happens when all that is taken away from people and the decline in the quality of life, it really did show me that, we are really providing a valuable service to my patients here. And I'm not just saying that, it's true. When it's not there, people feel it. Now, since I mentioned placebo, I do want to address that because that's one of the big, call it a criticism or something if you want, about acupuncture is what if it's just the placebo effect? So now we know, we have a lot of research showing it's not the placebo effect. There's about 13,000 research articles on acupuncture within the Cochrane Medical Database. So there's a ton of research showing that it outperforms placebo controls. It outperforms control groups where there's no intervention, that sort of thing. But the placebo effect is kind of a funny thing. I feel like in the future, it's gonna be backwards. The placebo effect might be what we're going for. There was a doctor, he was an oncologist. He was like a world-renowned oncologist. And he got really interested in how people get rid of warts. So if you notice around the world, there's all sorts of ways people get rid of warts. So in Ireland, you would, put potato skins on it overnight. You've heard the duct tape cure. Maybe you've heard the apple cider vinegar on a cotton ball with a Band-Aid. And around the world, there's all sorts of these remedies. None of them are the same. All of them work. Clearly, it's not the potato skin. Clearly, it's not the duct tape. There's something else going on that is affecting we'll call it a spontaneous elimination of these warts. And so this doctor, his whole book is about, it's questioning the premise of modern medicine, poo-pooing the placebo effect, because what he's saying is, if we can get rid of these growths that are warts, what's to say we can't do the same with cancer? And there needs to be a lot more research going in that direction. Now, one thing that I was always curious about was, where does the placebo effect come from? Everything in our body is an adaptation of a prior environmental pressure. And the people that are alive today are the people that adapted to their environment generations ago. Our parents and grandparents, going thousands of generations back, were survivors. We all lived. So where does the placebo effect come from? Well, if you go back far enough in human history, and even in present day in some cultures, you see what we can call shamanism. They didn't necessarily call it that. That's a word from Central Asia, but shamanism, right? So, you would do ecstatic dance or drumming all night, or you would eat different kinds of psychedelic plants and go into a trance state or something like that. And then you'd be cured. The shaman would sing a song to you, wave feathers in front of your face, and you'd be cured, right? And if you weren't cured, you died. And you didn't pass on your genes. And so slowly, over thousands of generations, humans have evolved the ability to have the placebo effect, the self-generated healing response from an external stimulus that should theoretically have no impact whatsoever. Why does singing a song to someone do anything? It's because you're present with that stimulus and you're being guided towards healing through that stimulus. So every single medical intervention benefits from the placebo effect, which is why it's so hard to tease it apart in clinical research. So when things get dismissed as a placebo, I'm not really convinced that that is super meaningful, because, like, for example, maybe you guys have seen this research where they tell people this is a sugar pill and it lowers their blood pressure. What's going on with that? And then at the end of the study, some of the participants said, hey, can I get some of those pills? It really worked. And the study partners say, why do you want the pill? It's a sugar pill. They're like, well, I don't care. It worked. So I think there's a lot more to dive into as far as the placebo effect. But I don't feel like it's super relevant to acupuncture. So that's just that's something that always comes up is acupuncture placebo? I don't think it is, but even if it was, I think maybe the most generous interpretation would be like, we're kind of orchestrating the body to induce a self-healing response, which sounds like placebo, but the needles themselves aren't necessarily doing anything. It's not like there's anything in the needle that's going into the body causing healing. There's no medication or anything. It's simply stimulating what I think is stimulating the nervous system to respond in a particular way to organize the self-healing response in the body, which is why it's so powerful, because once the body gets a signal that you can kind of push it in the right direction and you know you can feel better, well, then you have hope, right? And maybe you guys know Dr. Greenfield. He was a doctor of integrative medicine at Novant. I don't know if he's still there now, but I talked to him about this, and he said, you know, acupuncture is kind of mysterious. We don't really know how it works. And that's why he loves it so much, because the mystery implies possibility. So that's what I'd say as far as how acupuncture can sort of benefit patients is it's by being open-ended. It's by leaving open possibility that you can get better, and you might not necessarily understand why, but once you're there, do you really care? I mean, aside from curiosity or research, you know, questions, there's, you know, once you're done, you're done. So my goal as an acupuncturist is to get people through cancer treatment. My goal is to minimize the presence of side effects, because, you know, as you guys know, if your neuropathy gets too bad, you have to discontinue treatment. So every time that we can minimize someone's neuropathy and reverse it or stop it from progressing, that's a huge victory. They can finish their cancer treatment and live their life in a good way. So if you're thinking about incorporating acupuncture, just know, like, that's the intention, is to help you harmonize with these natural life cycles, the day-night cycle, seasonal cycle, and to support your body in its ability to self-heal. Because by the time you've had cancer, your body's self-healing mechanism is not working, right? Your body's, like, as we know, body's always kind of going through and trying to get rid of cells that are precancerous and things like that, but it's overwhelming. I mean, our modern world has so many stimuli in it that are frankly toxic. We have air pollution and things in the food and the water, and, you know, there's even speculation that artificial light and the throwing off circadian rhythm is contributing to cancer and things like that, sleep deprivation, all that sort of thing. So anything we can do to kind of tip the scales in the other direction towards self-healing, that's a really awesome thing. And one of the things that happens with acupuncture is something I coined the term positive side effects, where, yeah, you come in for your neuropathy, but all of a sudden you're sleeping better and you don't feel so stressed out and your mood is better. And not only that, like, talking holistically, the social aspect of cancer it's devastating to your support group, to the people that care about you and love you. They don't want to see you suffering. And when you say, oh yeah, my neuropathy is getting better, my brain fog is better, that makes them feel good. So it's like lightening the load for everyone involved. And that would be, to me, the absolute most important thing to do, is to treat people in a way that it just makes life easier for them. That's what it's all about. You know, the human body is an old cart held together by straps, and it's kind of a precarious thing we've got going on here, and it will fall apart eventually, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like, the phrase I like is dying is perfectly safe, you know? So we're all going to get there one day. And I think just making the ride as pleasant as possible is kind of the only thing we can do. If acupuncture is, you know, a part of that, I'm certainly happy to help. So yeah, I mean, is there something we didn't quite cover? Any questions people have, or anything you want me to clarify?
Yes, this was so fabulous. I really appreciate all this information. We are so glad to have you as a resource at Carolina Breast Friends. David, thank you. And we'll take some questions.
Sure.